not be afraid to go out on my own. Right? I think it was a big decision to sort of leave the comfortable big firm to go out on my own, but I think it was, the best decision. So I definitely would say if you feel something in your gut, as an entrepreneur, you're probably right.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more all of it away to help MVPs. I'm your host today, Brett Swartz, and every episode we are joined by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of success, faith, and impact. I'm excited about our next guest. She is out of the Philadelphia area, and she's a CPA by trade, and their mission is to provide their clients with a clear understanding of the dynamics of their business within their industry in order to form and achieve lasting growth and success. They have the innovative accounting model that eliminates the traditional busy season and focus on a unique process that works for business owners. They provide new solutions to their clients and different demands and superior individualized accounting, tax, and consulting services. What I like about our guest, she is focused on helping the small business scale to the next level, and that's where we're talking about scaling small business today and systems. Please welcome to the show with me, Anne Gannon. Anne, how are we doing?
Oh, great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yes, so I'm a CPA by trade. I actually grew up, we talked a little bit, South Florida, high school, college. I played professional golf, so my first goal was actually to be a professional golfer. But I quickly realized I'm very risk averse, and so playing for money was like not that much fun. So very quickly pivoted and realized that, I do love business. What I loved about the golf journey is I met a lot of entrepreneurs, people who are passionate about what they did, the business owner, at all different levels, right? Very wealthy and, startup. And so when I went back for accounting and ended up in a, big four accounting firm in downtown Boston, because my husband had gotten a job in Boston, so we moved there. I realized that my journey was so different from most accountants, right? Most accountants sort of came up the ranks through, doing internships, and I've always lived, in the world of being, a service provider to a business owner where, my background, I had, stayed at these people's houses. Like I just had a much more understanding of what the entrepreneur is and, the good and the bad of that. And so I quickly realized that, it was great to learn from the big four, but that wasn't, where I was destined to be. So I went out on my own. At the same time having, my two children, and sort of built the Largo Group, which was that whole idea of we are, flat fee. We want to be a resource throughout the year. We want to be in your corner. We don't just want to be sitting on the other side of the desk and lecturing you on what you need to do differently. We actually want to help you get better. And so both large and small, investors really resonated with that. And, we were sort of kind of going along our way, and then really finding a niche in hospitality just because, I had come from the golf background. I understood hospitality. I'd worked in restaurants. So I naturally felt like I could speak their language a lot more than, most accountants. And then all of a sudden COVID happened. And COVID really resonated with me because the other part of my background was my dad was an entrepreneur and his business failed, and it just changed the course of our family. It changed the course of our financial picture. And so all of a sudden in March 2020, I'm looking at 90% of my client base has a failing business, and nobody knows if they're going to get out of this. And very quickly, I was like, you know what? I'm not sitting on the sidelines. Like, yes, I'm just their accountant, or yes, I'm just their, tax advisor, but this is real to me. Like, I am not going to watch this happen. And so we pivoted. We did, weekly webinars. We transferred our whole model to a weekly approach, because what does it matter if you're waiting 30 days to look how your business is doing in the middle of COVID when you have no sales and you don't know if you need to lay people off? And it was a very real time, but it really was one of those opportunities to say we can do better as an organization. And if I fail, if I'm not giving you information that you find useful, right? Like that's my ultimate goal, is that I want to make you better. And so that was what we did. And as a result of that, I mean, our team is now restaurant people who have left the industry and, are really working as their eyes and ears to make sure that we're catching problems and we're guiding entrepreneurs in the right direction. And really, what's become our strength is taking that person who has a great idea, a great concept, and really giving them those systems and being that voice that helps them get to that next level of building a brand. And so that's really, what we love to do. And that's who we are.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Love it, Anne. And by the way, Anne Gannon, you can learn more about her by going to thelargogroup.com, thelargogroup.com. So a lot of cool stuff there. I love that. Yeah, the professional golfer, risk adverse, you figure that out. Then CPA, and then also very hands-on, especially during the COVID and everything that was going on there, and really empowering your clients, the customers that you serve. But before we dive into the secret to scaling small businesses systems, I'm curious, Anne, like growing up, like what was Anne's superpower besides being a really good golfer, right? Was there something that was like, man, Anne was just always naturally really gifted at? Was there something that kind of sticks out, and how does that help how you help people today?
I think what I've always been really good at, and I feel like this is people who don't understand golf, like, especially, in the 90s, like, literally my parents would, like, send me on a plane to, like, Oregon or, Chicago and be like, "Yeah, when you get there, you're gonna, like, stay at someone's house," or, like, I mean, it was very you have no cell phones, like, I disappeared for, like, 3 days, didn't even know I was missing, but, like, my parents didn't know where I was, and so, I mean, it was a whole different world of, like, you're just out there at a very young age because that's what golf is, right? Like, you just have to go to these tournaments and adapt, and so I feel like I was always really good at, like,
Mm.
adapting to my surroundings and, like, learning, like, what are the people of Chicago like? And, like, let's figure them out and know how to, fit in, and not just, like, a fit in, but really understand, like, meet them where they are. I feel like that's what I've always been really good at, and so and that was, I think, one thing that, like, when I was working at a big firm, it's like, it's not just a tax return to me. Like, I wanna know who this person is, like, what are they doing? Like, why are their books a mess if they're a mess? Like, I wanna know that person at that level so I can serve them where they are and not just this, I know more than you or, my knowledge. Like, I don't like that. I like the relationship where we're working together, we're gonna fix it, and we're ultimately gonna make it better moving forward.
Perfect. That's awesome. It's a great way to segue into our topic, which is scaling small business systems. And so let's dive right into that, Anne. So, Anne, what is the number one secret to scaling small business systems?
Yeah, I mean, I really think, it's interesting because, like, using COVID as an example, right? You have the mindset of the owner who just can't get out of their own way. Like, they can't get past the anger, and rightly so, right? The anger of, like, I had this path and now it's turned into something completely different and things have changed, versus the owner who really saw the opportunity. And I feel like, well, that's, one point in time that really is, the first step in any growth is just, can the owner ultimately see it, right? And I think see it in a way that's like, it's okay that this becomes more than you, right? I think when you start in a small business, it's great because you're the guy or you're the girl, right? Like, everything flows through you, and that's awesome, and that works. But it ultimately has to transition to something that's a living, breathing thing that's not the owner. And I feel like that's the first place to start, is just like, fundamentally, can you see a time where you're still involved? Because I think the other piece of it, as someone who's looking to scale, is I don't believe in the whole idea of, like, you're going to be sitting on a beach while your company is just magically a $20 million organization, right? Because I can tell you, we work with the big guys too, and they're not sitting on the beach, right? Like, they are actively involved, but their role is different. So I think we have to start with having an expectation that is the same, right? No expectation gaps. And then ultimately being open to that journey of, what are the things that ultimately replace you? Like, when I'm talking to most owners, especially in the scaling part, I'm really trying to understand, like, what are the things you do every day? And how could we eventually get it to the point where your team is doing it, but you're comfortable that they're doing it in the same way? And a lot of that is just not being afraid of the checklist or the system that ultimately makes you the reviewer or, the higher level person. I think the second thing is that leadership skill doesn't always come naturally to most entrepreneurs because most entrepreneurs are gifted in whether it's a financial aspect of their business or, an artistic aspect if they're the chef. And so I other think the second really important part is like being open to the fact that you haven't led a team of 100 yet. And that's okay, right? But like we have to build that skill just like we have to build all of these other skills on your team. And then together, that's where scaling really starts.
Okay, cool. I think I got some of this right here. This is awesome. So, number one, it sounds like it's a mindset, and it's an openness and willingness to look out in front to see how the role might be different from today, and that's okay, right? How to transfer some of the day to day, right, is first thing, and so seeing that, and not being afraid of that as well. The leadership skill that realizes, hey, I've maybe led, 3 to 5 or 5 to 10, but I haven't led 10 to 100 or 10 to 50 on that next level of leadership skill that takes to do that. Is that a fair summary so far, Ann?
Yes, no, definitely. And I think that's the first place to start. You're by no means at the end. That's just phase like
That's the
A. It's
second
not
place.
even
That's the second
one.
place.
That's just,
Yeah.
now you're ready to really dive in. The other thing I think in scaling is a lot of times people forget, they get so caught up in the finances that we forget about the product or the service that we're building. And I think the other piece to beginning the scaling journey, which is what we work a lot with our clients on, is finding those unique elements of who you are and what you do. Because the other thing that we sort of, the false hope is that like who you are today is who you are going to be 10x version of you, right? And that's not really true that like your brand and your product will evolve, but your role as the leader, that's probably the most important element for you because you as the entrepreneur have built the product where it is today. So that's where like you're not sitting on the beach, right? Because you as the owner ultimately own the fact that you're continuing to evolve your product, you're learning what works, you're learning what doesn't, and you're probably spending more and more of your time in what is your product or service 12 months from now? What is your product or service 24 months from now? And that part is as important as your team being good today. And I feel like that's the part where people really start to plateau. It's like your financials can be great, your team can be great, but if you're not continuing to really move the needle on evolving your product forward, then it's gonna just stall out, right? Like there's only so much you can do, but you have to have both where you're continuing to evolve and your team is getting better at what they do right now.
Yeah, I love that. I heard a quote by John Maxwell. And he talks about, leaders have a unique ability to see what others don't see before others see it, and to take action and do things that need to be done before others do it, right? And so it's this mindset and practice of the visionary, right? And anticipating, 12, 24, 36 months in advance and working towards that. I also think about my wife and I, we have kids, 5 kids. And, there's like the baby stage, right? 0 to like 2-ish. And then you have like this toddler 2 to 5-ish. And then like when 5 hits, it actually gets a lot easier. We got 5 kids, so we've been through this 5 times. And now our youngest is now 6, and we're just like, it's amazing. We can, travel like really freely. And like, but before it was like, this is our babies, you know what I mean? It was just like really close to home. But I feel like business is a lot of ways like that. How do you see that, the baby, the child, the teenager, the adult, and what particularly now do you do with the systems wise, right? Like besides mindset and besides, defining who you are and what you do and such and pushing ahead, what do you practically do with your clients to get the thing to grow up?
Yeah, so ultimately, I really find, regardless of what industry you're in, that weekly accountability model is the one that will move you forward. That, fundamentally, if you're looking at your numbers monthly, if you're looking at your operations monthly, even if you're like doing annual reviews, you're waiting so long between checkpoints, right? And ultimately, I find, especially on the financial side, that we have to have weekly accountability for your team and ultimately the company as a whole. So I preach that. I think that was probably again one of the best lessons of COVID was just pushing that to say like really when you're looking weekly, you're not just looking at last week, you're 4 weeks ahead because when we get to the end of the month, we've looked at every week of this month. Like we know these numbers at a much more involved level than we do if we're looking for the first time, on the 10th of the following month. So I really find weekly accountability on both the owner side and on the team side, but from a place of it's okay if we miss our weekly target, right? Like we are going to miss our targets, but we have to learn from that and say maybe our customer behavior is different, maybe our costs are different. But every time we evaluate weekly, we're going to learn something and we're going to get better every week.
Okay, it's positive. It's positive. Okay, that makes sense. A weekly accountability model makes sense. Looking at your numbers. So this is not just financial. I imagine it's also the KPIs. It's also
Yes.
the targets that we're looking at. It's also the number of either it's sales calls, whether it's proposals. But like, walk us through the key numbers that we want to make sure that we're looking at weekly.
Yeah, so I definitely think, and especially in the world of, social media, like I think that it's not just financial, right? It's all measurable things that we can find out of our business. So if we're marketing, we should be looking at, what are the trends on the marketing side? How many engagements have we had? How many views? Like all of those things tie back to ultimately, if I've had all this engagement and I've had all of this attention on social media, did my sales move? Right? Because I think too often we're looking at those apart from each other. But if I had all those engagements and my sales didn't move, maybe there's something in the messaging that isn't working. So definitely that tie between whatever you're doing in marketing and sales on a weekly basis. And of course the marketers of the world hate it, but you're not saying it's not working. But we have to ask the questions, right? We have to say like if we didn't see something work, let's just tweak it a little bit. Let's see if something else works. Then on the, business side, I mean, I love to look at cash flow on a weekly basis. I think there's always the fear of like, well, it's always different because I pay my rent the first of the month and my payroll's every 2 weeks. And as much as it's different, setting a target every week will help us feel more comfortable with our cash. It'll help us know when maybe we have a little extra to invest more in marketing, right? It ties back to all of the things that we're looking at from a KPI standpoint every week. So, together, having this dashboard for what are the things you, as the entrepreneur or the owner, have to look at every week, and then making sure your team owns some of that. Because I think the other missing piece is like you as the owner, I'm not saying you have to go find your social media views, right? Ask your marketing team, say, hey, send me this every Monday for last week in an email, and then I'm going to look at it for 5 minutes, right? So it doesn't have to be I'm transforming 20 hours of your week. I like to say it's, 15, 20 minutes a day and maybe an hour once a week once we have your dashboard set up. And now we're constantly evolving our plan for the week based on the data that we have for last week. And that is, I think, the magic. That's where it happens, where all of a sudden the growth really takes off because we're able to tweak right away.
Okay, I'm thinking I'm catching here. And by the way, thelargogroup.com, thelargogroup.com to learn more about Anne Gannon, professional golfer, risk adverse CPA, but she's very hands on and she loves to help you, the small business owner, scale your business. By the way, if you're also a medium sized or big business, she can do that too. She's done that too. She's worked with large companies. She's worked with a big five accounting firm. So this is not just for the small person, but the fundamentals are always so important. So this applies to everyone that's listening today. I like the dashboard part, Anne, and I like the weekly accountability. And so this is what your team does. You will go in with the business and say, hey, for the next 6 months or year, or whatever the plan is, once a week, we're going to take baby steps. We're going to get the dashboard in place, your KPIs in place, understanding your numbers in place, and then we're going to set these targets, and we're going to come in. Is that what you're doing? And you're coaching them through this, and then and obviously it's like a muscle, right? It's like a personal trainer that muscle starts to build and build and build, and eventually they're taking off. But what they don't measure, they don't get results, right?
Right, and I think the other part is that we see a lot, is, "Well, my manager can't do that, so I have to do it." So the other part where our team can help is we actually coach that manager, because a lot of times it's not that your manager can't do it, it's just that they don't know how right now. And I think if we look at these as skills versus just, "Oh, my manager's terrible, and they'll always be terrible," but rather like, let's invest in them, right? If you're choosing to keep this manager on your team, whatever they are, your CFO, your COO, whatever that role is, then let's build that skill to what you need to get the organization to grow. And sometimes having that outside voice, we do weekly coaching calls with that team member to just educate them because a lot of things tie back to that financial understanding. So we also offer courses to teach the financial accounting just so they understand a P&L and balance sheet. But sometimes just having that outside voice to say, I met in person, I'm actually in our on-site classroom now, but I had a group that came out a couple weeks ago and the owner didn't come. He sent his whole top level management team without him. And what was interesting is I started the day with like, there's no stupid question. Right. Like, so if you don't know what a P&L is, or you don't know what a balance sheet is, but you're managing, million dollar organization, ask it now. Like, we'll figure it out together. And by the end of the day, they were asking some basic questions, but I think they left like, oh, like I can understand that. So sometimes if you feel like your manager doesn't care about the finances or doesn't want to talk KPIs, sometimes there truly could be an education gap. And I think that's where identifying these gaps that exist, but not letting it go because you like the manager, but rather like, let's work on it together. Let's all get better together so we can all move forward.
Yeah, I think if you have a humble mindset and you're hungry to learn and you're willing to look at the gaps and also revisit if it's fundamentals for some people, revisit the fundamentals. But don't be afraid. When you get afraid, and there's no transparency and communication, that's where things really break down. Okay, so you build up this weekly dashboard, a weekly understanding of cash flow, a weekly understanding of KPIs, and you're tracking it. You got it all going. What's the next step from there, Ann, to scale your small business systems?
So I really like to take a step back and build a 3-year plan. So I think, 1 year when you're really in growth mode is almost too short, right? Like you're not going to be able to do everything in 1 year. And sometimes 5 years seems too far out, right? So I really like a 3-year plan. So if you're saying, okay, I'm a $5 million operation, but I really want to get to a $10 million operation. Well, again, that's probably not going to happen in 12 months, but what are the things that we need to do in year 1 to get us to where we are in year 2 and year 3? And that's where sometimes you can open up to, am I looking to do this through acquisition? Right? A lot of times hospitality, it's because I'm going to buy, a place down the street. Am I going to build a new location or a new office somewhere? Am I going after a new, revenue stream, whatever it is? Because a lot of times we're going to have less cash in year 1 and year 2 to get us to where we need to be in year 3. So if we can see that, then we can set expectations for, okay, if we're acquiring a business at the end of year 1, then we need to spend this time making sure our existing operation is really tight. There's no, issues here. And then year 2 is going to be, how do we grow into this new whatever it is, right? Both from the owner standpoint and the team standpoint, chances our roles are different, expectations are different, dollars are different. And then by year 3, here's ultimately where we want to be. And I think there's a lot of nuance there that as an owner, you sometimes just think, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there. But, what does your team look like at double your size? What are those roles that you're needing to fill? What are those, if you, Google or AI job description, right? If you're going to all of a sudden turn someone from, manager to COO, what is that expectation gap? Because those are skills you probably need to work on in year 1 to make sure that person is ready to go in year 3. So I love the 3-year planning. It's really fun. And my favorite part is I've actually had, several of our clients, we did this 3 years ago, and they're now really starting to hit those targets we set. And it's like, oh wow, like look at where we are, exponential growth in 3 years just by kind of following the path that we, set forth and just checking in, every week along the way.
Okay, that's powerful. I like so a 3-year plan, right? Really clarifying the org chart, what it looks like in 3 years. Who are the seats? Who are the people that need to be on the seats on the plane, on the bus, however you want to call it, and then what does it look like when you double the size, right? I'm planning for that, and then also planning for the skills of someone who might be moving into that next role. There's a lot there for an entrepreneur, right? So talk about the value of I guess the traditional visionary versus the integrator. I've even heard visionary versus like the day-to-day leader of the operations. What's the EOS system or different systems. So is there one that you generally follow as a framework there, and or talk about even just live org charts, like, like doing an audit of an org chart and finding out like, if it's healthy and looks really good.
I like the live org chart. What I like to do is take the names off and really look at, we use a couple, kind of visual systems of really building out what are those roles. Because I feel like once you take the names away, as you grow, the roles will change. And it doesn't mean the people have to change, but definitely those people need to be growing along with your organization in order for it to continue to work. So I think taking the names off, and I really like to do that, at least once a year. But depending on growth level, maybe it's twice a year. But, there definitely is truth to as you grow, your organization will be drastically different. So we just have to be open to that. And as the team, educating them on like, this role will change. We know this will change, but here's what we want to do to make sure you're ready to step into that new role. But definitely, I mean, I find in any growth, probably 60% of the time is spent on the team side and the labor because it's such, the owner, like I said before, the owner can't do everything. So the other part of that org chart is, at the end of 3 years, you 10x your business. What do you want to do as the owner? Like, what is your role? Because the other part of it is I think you have to be baseline skilled in all areas of the top leader if you're going to stay involved, right? So if there's things you need to work on, then I think you need to be open to working on those and building that skill, and not just saying, well, I'm not good at that. Well, you're not maybe, but if you're going to be successful, we need to have at least like the C level knowledge of all of these things, but then ultimately, what are you best at? And that will help us see what is the team that we need so they are filling those gaps too.
Okay, let's make a live example. This kind of make it practical, right? Because I love all this what you're saying, and I want to kind of break it down. So, our company, for example, capital gains tax solutions, right? We help people exit highly appreciated assets, defer massive capital gains tax, and then invest the capital or build the next business venture. And so we serve purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and we work with CPAs, work with financial advisors, M&A advisors. So we have these different groups, right? And so I'm the founder. I'm like the visionary, right? We have our COO, and then we have, I call her our systems design architect, where she's like all really focused just like on systems. So she's also kind of managing some of the team members. We have our podcast, kind of person who books and schedules. We have our video editor who's doing all the content, I guess completion, if you will, packaging it and then sending it out to YouTube. And then we have our transaction coordinator who's helping with all the transactions, right? And then we have also our auditor, our internal auditor, who's helping with the P&Ls, the books and records when it comes to all of these trusts that we help to manage. Okay, so we have a lot of different people here, and we're also bringing some new people on as well, right? I'm like, oh man, we're about to be at like 11 people. We've never been at 11 before, right? And so taking out all the names, I'm identifying some of these key things, right? Some key things here. So how would you walk me through to say, if that's healthy, that looks good, or like what question would you ask to make sure that's organized properly for success?
Yeah, so I think drawing out, the org chart today of, by job descriptions, making sure that each team member understands, their role in the organization. And then I think ultimately the question is looking forward, right? Is the goal that you're at 11 and you're going to get to 15? So what are like the next gaps that you see? Because I think it's not just solving for today, but I think it's really being honest first about people's strengths and weaknesses, and really saying, okay, this person's great at this, so let's make sure that they are, doing what they're best at the most amount of time possible. And then, not being afraid. I always tell our team because, I think every entrepreneur's been in the exact same situation. It's like, just tell me if you need more resources, right? We have to be open, especially in growth mode, to if it's just not working or you feel like you're really not great at this, that's okay, but we have to be open to let's find the resources that fix this so we can all continue to move forward. And there's, lots of different places to find the resources or the admin or whatever, but we don't want you to just die on this hill because you think it's your job and now you want to be praised at the end of the day. Like we want the best result across the board. But, I think taking the names off and just, what is this job description I put this person in, is that really who they are? Is that what they're, great at? And I think, the other piece in growth mode is there's probably times where you're doing a lot. Like you hear like, oh my God, you're doing too much at once. Well, as the entrepreneur side, we have to, right? There's no like stopping this train. So sometimes also building out segments. I really loved, we always go to the restaurant leadership conference and First Watch was there. And, it's great to hear the growth story of First Watch, right? Like they built, a great brand and then they also went public. And it was really interesting to hear that their CEO said that's exactly what they did. They had like one team that was just like, be the best First Watch you can be. Keep your eye on the ball. Like expectations are here. Perfection is what we want. Like nothing is going to be dropped in terms of, quality and everything like that. And then we had a whole other team that was worried about the IPO and they weren't even allowed to like talk to the other team, right? It was just, you guys are in charge of the IPO. You're going to go do that. And like, don't worry about what we're doing over here. And so sometimes in any size, like that's important to say, if we're all trying to do both at once, we're all going to fail. But by separating completely, they were able to do like two big things at once, which was, pretty cool.
Okay, that's good wisdom. I like that. These are good questions to ask. Right? What are the next gaps? What are the current job descriptions now? Understanding the strengths and honestly, like looking at strengths and weaknesses, and then, ideally, you're getting them to do what they're best at most of the time, right? That makes sense. And then be open to like places to let go of, right? Which makes sense. And then understand we want just the best result. But I think that's a key, like taking the names out of it, because there's times when it's like there's certain things and we're going through, and it's like I think the entrepreneur has different expectations of what their capacity for and their frequency of like getting things done versus what maybe a team member might be that area. But even then, like it's unrealistic because what the other person can do is not you, and B, they're probably gonna do a lot better than you if you got out of the way. So coach through like that piece of it too, like the clarity part, right? Like really getting clear on the KPIs. Is there any like insider wisdom that you would say there? And then how many they should even be doing per day, right? I heard, maybe what are the 4 things you're going to get done today is the beginning of the day. What are the 4 that you got done, and not putting too much on any one team player. Any thoughts on that, Anne?
Yes, because I think, we can die in the world of data, right? So I think what I love is the exercise of remembering that there's, say you and I are meeting, right? There's a third person in the room that is your customer, right? So I think sometimes just that clarification, because in any organization, right, you're going to have someone who's like, I want to do it my way. No, I want to do it your way. And then, as the entrepreneur, it's like, oh, should I get involved? Should I not get involved? Like they need to learn. But I think if we remember that our goal is to do the best for our customer, right? And if however they think it was done is more of just a personality control thing, but it's a good result, then I think as an entrepreneur, yes, like I need to step back, I need to let them go. But if I'm looking at that end result going, that's not really the best, then I'm going to step in. And so I think, that's what I always catch our entrepreneurs is like, you're the voice of the customer. Like you're not, because they're going to love to paint you in the corner of like the crazy entrepreneur, but you're ultimately the creator, right? Like you have created something your customers like. And so you are the voice of that because you inherently know what works. And so I think at times we can't let ourselves be talked down from that voice, but we want to pick and choose our battles, right? Again, we want our team to grow, we want our team to lead, but if we're the voice of our customer and the voice of our brand, then I think we'll know when to step in.
So good. Anne Gannon, everybody. You can learn more by going to thelargogroup.com, thelargogroup.com. Again, their mission is to provide their clients a clear understanding of the dynamics of their business within their industry in order for them to achieve lasting success, growth, and impact. So cool what's going on. I want to shift a little bit here, Anne, and it's part of what we geek out here with our tax. This is part of why we love CPAs. It has to do with capital gains tax solutions, right? In fact, we wrote a book on it, and you want to check out. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We got Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank and other really smart people. But we found is the entrepreneur does all the things you say. They grow this massive company, and then sometimes they forget that 20 to 50% of the proceeds, the partner is the government, right? And the government is ready and willing and able to capture that tax. and go ahead and spend it pretty fast, right? And so we've developed a solution that gives the purpose-driven entrepreneur and investor the ability to sell, defer the capital gains tax, but be flexible with how and when they invest the funds. So no longer having to force with that 1031 exchange or that like kind equal or greater value of debt, or even it works for Bitcoin and stock and different things like that. And so I'm curious, like, what has been the go-to for you? And they call you and say, Anne, I've scaled it from 5 million to 50 million. I'm ready to sell. I have this massive capital gains tax. What's been the go-to when they're about to close in about 30 days, and they're going to get
I
taxed
know.
with a big, and they're in Philadelphia, right? One of the largest, tax places.
Yes. No, I mean, I think that to us, I try to really make sure that our owners are aware of the valuation, aware of their equity long before we get to 30 days out. So I like, again, that 3-year plan. I do a lot with exit planning too, because I think, first of all, you want to make sure you're getting the most for your business. And that comes from having clean books that make sense, that tell the right story, and people very clearly understand the profitability of your business. So if we're waiting until 6 months before we're going to go sell to look at our tax return, like, it's probably not the best we could do. But if we're looking, 3 years before to really build a good story and make sure like it looks exactly how it is, then I think we're set up for success. And the other piece of that really is, when you sell, what is this going to look like? And I think that's where, I mean, on our end, I'm not an investment advisor, but I've seen a lot of people either get into a new investment, buy real estate, buy other things, be strategic on when you do the payout. Like, does it, I've told people if they have a huge thing, maybe it makes sense to do like seller financing. Don't take it all at once. Do an installment sale, potentially, right? But I think to me, it all starts with knowing that your tax picture is different than everybody else. So you don't listen to the internet, right? Starts with you knowing your tax picture and ultimately your effective tax rate. How do you get to your effective tax rate every year? And just looking at this as part of the plan to close. Because I have one guy now, we're new, and he sold his business for like, $2 million before he started working with me. And he's like, Ann, can you help me figure out a tax strategy? And I'm like, would have been nice to talk before, like, because at some point there's only so much you can do. But I think, just educating yourself on taxes first is a great place to start.
Okay, this is cool. I love it. I love that you help them to empower them with the education and pre-planning. You're right. You do need to set up 99% of the really effective strategies before you close escrow, before the buyer removes all contingencies. And so Anne's completely right on that. You mentioned installment sale, right? I think this is key, right? So here's what we believe. We believe the installment sale is the blockbuster way of doing it. At least a traditional installment sale, right? Because like as a business owner, you might sell for 10 million, let's just say, and you're in New York and you had paid, 4 million of tax and the business, the basis was zero. All of your equity is tied to the old asset, right? So the old asset, which means like if you're a business owner selling, the last thing you want to do is have to go back and foreclose and take it back. In other words, you're not diversified. You're not necessarily you're basically tied to the old one, right? And you're trying to move on. So we love the installment sale way of doing it, but we like to do it with the trust. And so watch this. We like to do it where this trust does an installment sale first with the seller, and then the trust sells it to the buyer. And so the funds can hit into a liquid diversified, Charles Schwab account and be able to go into the next business venture. Because what most entrepreneurs actually want to do is start that next venture and be able to have that funding be the source of which they defer all the taxes. So we just did one in Massachusetts. It's an $8 million, and it was a automotive sale. Couple that they're like, late 30s. And they started it, or they actually bought it like with $100,000 of revenue, and they just, blew it up to multi-million dollars of revenue. So they sold it and had a huge payday. At least they sold 66% of it, right? And they were able to defer all that tax and then use that to diversify and create different revenue to come in somewhere else. But also it could be used to fund their next business once they have like a 2 to 3 year kind of hold when they're still working out. And so this opens up the entrepreneurial world for people. So I've had clients put it into Bitcoin, put it into top rated stocks, put it into other real estate investments, and we call it the Netflix to the old Blockbuster installment sale, or the old Blockbuster 1031. So, anyways, if anyone's wondering about this, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. But I'm curious, Anne, when you hear that as a CPA, and you mentioned you're risk adverse, right? What questions come to mind? And when you haven't heard of it before, because most CPAs we work with hadn't heard of it, the CPA tax attorney we use is the one who created this. He's a genius. But I'm curious from your perspective, it's called a deferred sales trust. Have you ever heard of that before?
So I have actually seen it a couple of times, but yes, I think, to me, again, I would love to learn more about it because I've only read it at a very like high level. But I think, ultimately, I think anything that you can do to just, open people's eyes to different possibilities. Because like you said, too many times you're just being told it is what it is, right? When you do the tax return. And it's, there could have been other solutions that I think just having those conversations, and that's what I try to do is just educate my clients on like, here's 3 different options, right? You're the one making the decision, but if I can give you those options before I'm just saying, "Nope, this is it, like, this is what you owe," I think there's room to educate yourself and to be open to different ways to get to a better result.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you, Anne, for going through that with me. I'm always curious on the CPA side of things. So, by the way, if people want to learn more about that, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or check out the book Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. That being said, we're running out of time. Anne, are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready.
All right, knowing what you know now, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget, make sure to tell yourself to do?
Not be afraid to go out on my own, right? I think it was a big decision to sort of leave the comfortable big firm to go out on my own. But I think it was, the best decision. So I definitely would say, don't be, if you feel something in your gut, as an entrepreneur, you're probably right.
Fantastic. Question number 2, what are you most curious about right now?
Well, I love it. I want to learn more about your exit plans book. So definitely that. But no, I think I'm curious about, we've kind of gotten out of the world of COVID. I'm curious about, the future of especially, small to middle sized businesses with technology. I think it's interesting to see how that is changing and how quickly it's changing.
Oh, so fascinating with AI and what it's going to do for the world and in so many different ways. Question number 3, what's the number one book you've recommended or given for the most in the past year?
I like Grant Cardone's 10X rule. It's my favorite one.
Awesome. Love it. I guess last question because we're completely out of time. After all your success and helping all the people you've helped, and using the gifts you've been given to bless more people, I'm curious, what's the best way that you stay centered in your values and also practice a mindset of stewardship over ownership?
I mean, again, I think remembering that your voice is for the customer, right? And if I look at, we are, hospitality focused in a lot of what we do, and our customers have been through a lot. So I think remembering that, my voice is for them. If I can make their life easier, then I've done a good job at the end of the day.
And again, it's been more than a pleasure to get to know you. You shared so much wisdom. I felt like at least one book, maybe 2 books out of this episode here. I want to thank you for being a advocate, a champion for the small business owner, for your clients, teaching us how to scale our small business systems, right? As well, I want to thank you and encourage you to keep using your gifts of adapting to your surroundings and meeting people where they are, right? You truly have that gift. And I'm so glad that it shined through today. Thank you, Anne Gannon, for being
Yeah.
on the show. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, can you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. So check out our website, thelargogroup.com, and you'll learn all about us and find out how to get a hold of us.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Anne. I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build It to Billions podcast. Again, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors like you on your journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. And our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth in life so you can give more or all of it away. I'm Brett Swartz. I so appreciate everyone watching this episode. Take some action today. Get with Anne, largogroup.com, and or if you're exiting or about to exit or thinking about exiting multi-million-dollar business, real estate, Bitcoin, stock, any asset of any kind, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or check out our book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. Make sure you have a plan in place so that 20 to 50% of your proceeds aren't crushed by the capital gains tax man. We appreciate everyone out there. We'll talk to you soon. Bye now.